Okay, here's hoping I can actually get some stuff done. I think that we're close to the end of the actual book, and we're going to be getting the actual little extra stuff. Oh boy. Benno's lecture. The High Bishop and High Priest looked so intense that I ended up meek and timid. The High Priest must have noticed my fearful twitching and brought the Bible over, offering to read it to me until someone came to get me. I appreciated the thought, but I felt some kind of weird pressure from him, like a determination to prevent me from escaping so intense I could feel it radiating off him. I really wanted to run away. A boy named Lutz has arrived at the gate claiming he is here for mine. A gray priest came to the room not long after fifth bell. I set him release since that meant I could finally leave. Well, now that Lutz is here, I have to get going. High Bishop, High Priest, thank you for spending so much time with me today. Before you go, mine, take this and give it to your parents. The High Bishop gave me a letter of invitation. This was bad, since a letter of invitation from the High Bishop was the same thing as a letter of summons you couldn't refuse. The date was third bell, the day after tomorrow. I swallowed hard and took the board from him. Lutz, thank you so much for coming to get me. The moment I left the temple and saw Lutz, I felt an indescribable sense of relief flowing through me. I actually jumped into his arms and hugged him to show how glad I was. He stumbled a bit but stayed upright without falling. I rubbed my head against his shoulder and he sighed, "What'd you do this time?" I don't really know, but I think this is the biggest self-destruction I've ever done. Lutz patted my head and grinned. Well, don't worry, Benno's waiting for you with a big smile and a bulge for a vein. Can I go home now? I'm feeling really tired. He told me to drag you here if I have to, and you look fine right now, so yeah, you're coming with me. I was mentally exhausted from the temple. You're in trouble, girl. But Lutz was dragging me to be slammed by another one of Benno's lectures. I felt as if my one ally had betrayed me. I followed him to the Gilberta Company like a fearful lamb to the slaughter. Benno was waiting for us, and we were taken to his office immediately. He told me to sit in the usual spot. Benno was in front of me, Mark was standing behind Benno, and Lutz sat next to him instead of me. Benno, wow, mine? Uh-huh. Alright, there's a mountain of things I want to say, but I stiffened up, expecting his lecture to last a very long time. But Benno just sighed. First, a message from Karina. She wants to see the dress and hairpin you wore at the baptism. That was some weird fashion. You drew a lot of attention to yourself. Why'd you pick an outfit like that? They were just remade hand-me-downs from Thule. There wasn't any deep meaning to it. I don't mind showing her my clothes, so she'll have to ask my mom about how we made it since she did all the work. Alright, go ahead and ask her to drop by sometimes, said Benno casually before clasping his hands together above the table and leaning for a bit, glaring at me. Alright, just spit it all out. Depending on what happened in that temple, what I say here, and your future are gonna both change a lot. Well, didn't you hear about it from Lutz? Several days had passed since the baptism ceremony. I would have thought that Lutz would have talked to him by now. Hearsay always twists information. Why would I ask Lutz what happened when I could just ask you instead? Not to mention, who knows what information you hid from him? He glared at me like a carnivore who had found its prey, making me gasp a bit. I could guess that he wouldn't be letting me off easy. Where should I start? After you collapsed in the ceremony. Say everything that happened after you left Lutz. Don't leave out a single detail. I collapsed, left the room in search of water, and wandered into a zone for nobles. A shrine maiden found me and took me to a book room. When I reached that point in the story, Benno's eyes opened wide. A book room? Didn't think there was one of those in the temple. You didn't know about it, Benno? Normal people don't risk their lives by wandering into an area for nobles. Wake up and realize what an idiot you are. What do you think's gonna happen if you keep walking into danger yourself like that? It was true that most people weren't allowed to go there. Benno was right. Though I was glad I had wandered in there, since I wouldn't have found the book room otherwise. The shrine maiden told me only people affiliated with the temple could go into the book room, so I stupidly, in my opinion, decided to be... Actually, this actually ends up working out very well for her in the end. I'm not just talking about this volume. I'm talking about when it comes to, like, season 2... Yeah, it was 2 seasons. I had to think for a second. I think. Yeah, 2 seasons, I think. Or 3. I can't remember anymore. So I decided to become a shrine maiden and went straight to the High Bishop to ask for his permission. You idiot! Think for just 1 second before you pull this garbage. Come on! Ow, ow! Benno leaned forward to pinch my chinks and pull. Mark and Lutz watched calmly, making no move to help me. Yeah, they know you deserve that. I rubbed my stinging cheeks, and Benno urged me on, looking very frustrated. So, what did he say? He said I could be an apprentice shrine maiden if my parents permitted it, and I donated money. And, did you donate? Not yet, she offered. So she hasn't lost that money yet. Benno furrowed his brows with a strict look in his eyes. I could tell immediately he was worried that I had donated money, then failed to get my parents' permission in order to calm Benno down. I puffed out my chest with pride and told him what happened. No, not yet. I just told them that I had enough money to donate about 1 large gold as payment for letting me use the book room, but I haven't given it to them yet. I'm not dumb enough to pay for something before they guarantee I can have it. I intended to calm him down, but first Benno, then Mark and Lutz all held their hands in pain as if I had given them all headaches. That price is so stupidly high, I don't even know what to say. I mean, they treated me really well thanks to it, so obviously I expected that my donation offer was a little high, but apparently it was so high that even a highly successful merchant got a headache thinking about it. Anyway, I went home to talk to my family about becoming a shrine maiden, and they got really mad about it. They said only orphans become shrine maidens. Well, yeah, they have a point, you know. The high priest said that there are noble children there too, though. I tilted my head, not understanding why Daddy got... He's talking about being a gray robe priest. Benno scratched his head and explained how the temple hierarchy worked. You remember how some priests had blue robes and some had gray robes, right? The blue-robed priests and shrine maidens are nobles, while the gray-robed ones are orphans. Gray-robed priests and shrine maidens get worked to the bone for no pay, usually serving as the attendants or servants of the blue-robed priests and shrine maidens. Revealed Benno, making me gasp. I had thought the color just signified the difference between apprentices and full-fledged workers. No, I can understand your thinking on that, but it's not. I never dreamed that there was such a big difference between them. You're not a noble, so if you join the temple, you'll end up as a gray shrine maiden. What kind of parents would allow that? He said, to which I nodded. Now I understood why Dad had gotten so mad as he did. Yeah. I definitely wouldn't be able to last doing that kind of work, and any loving father would oppose their daughter being worked like a slave for no pay. So, Lutz said you were going there to turn them down. Did you actually manage to do it? After I mentioned... Why did you mention this? You could have just said you were sickly. Why did you have to mention the devouring? Well, then she doesn't know. She doesn't know this stuff. And I don't even think original mine would have known this stuff. So, yeah. After I mentioned that I had the devouring, they brought in a golden chalice that a statue in the chapel had been holding. It shined when I touched it, and they gave me a letter of invitation to give my parents. I explained. Benno rubbed his temple hard and let out a heavy sigh. Yeah, you're stuck with them now. Just be glad you get to survive now. You're lucky. Yeah! I didn't understand why he called me lucky when I was stuck going to the temple. Benno didn't address my confusion and instead started thinking about something. Then he shot his head up and looked at me firmly with a hard look in his eyes. Mine. How about we sign another magic contract? What about how the products you make will be managed? Why? I ended up defensive after he brought up magic contracts out of nowhere. Benno rubbed his chin and kept looking at me. It won't happen immediately, but you're going to end up dragged into the world of nobles sooner or later. Contract magic is the best tool we commoners have for dealing with nobles on equal terms. Have you been expecting me to get wrapped up with the nobility ever since our first magic contract? At first, it was mainly just insurance for me. I didn't know what kind of kid you were at the time, and contract magic keeps things firmly in place. But I did know that you might have the devouring. If you did, you'd need to sign a contract with a noble to survive. I know that a magic contract will be useful for dealing with that noble. The reason Benno had signed a magic contract with Lutz and I, despite us being kids, was simply because he had expected nobles to get involved, potentially years in the future. But I have no intention of signing a contract with a noble. You've managed to live on your own terms up until now because you haven't met any nobles. But that'll be over once the temple drags you to them. You have to act on the assumption that you'll get involved with nobles sooner rather than later. There's not a noble in the world who won't try to get their hands on a devouring girl with revolutionary product ideas like yours. Especially now. What do you mean especially now? I asked. Because you're baptized. I think. She is baptized, I just don't know if that's the reason. Benno lowered his voice, and after making it clear this was information he had only recently gotten his hands on, explained. This region ended up mostly unaffected since our Archduke kept a neutral position and didn't get involved, but a lot of larger regions got wrapped up into a fierce political war with the sovereignty. Large-scale political purges were held all over the country, and there are a lot fewer nobles alive than there used to be. It sure got really violent really fast. I tried thinking back to what I remembered about the world history, but I didn't know exactly what time period this world was, and even with a frame of reference, I couldn't guess what would be happening in the future. I lacked information, and without a bird's eye view of this mess, I was as good as blind. I'm willing to bet this is not just back in time. This is a whole completely new world entirely, so her trying to go back through history, not gonna happen. Naturally, the gap left by these dead nobles needs to be filled. The survivors are mobilizing. They're reaching out to branch families, adopting, marrying more, seeking out new connections and power. People, money, and products are moving faster than ever before. There's so few nobles that these forced into the temple as blue-robe priests and shrine maidens during internal struggles are flooding back to their homes en masse. What do you think that means for the temple? Benno glared at me, and I tilted my head. I looked to Mark and Lutz for help, but Mark just smiled, and Lutz was just as confused as I was. Is there a problem with there not being enough nobles in the temple? I can't think of anything since I don't know what goes on in the temple or how everything works. Or how anything works there. Isn't it a good thing since there'll be fewer people to overwork the Grey Priests and Shrine Maidens? First of all, they'll get fewer donations. Second of all, without nobles to give them work, they'll end up overwhelmed with unemployed orphans. It'll be harder for the orphans to survive there. That's awful! I let her shout, and Benno sighed, shaking his head. That's not the worst part. Remember that chalice you said you touched? Those temple guys call it a divine tool, but it's actually a magic tool. Blue-robe priests and shrine maidens pour their mana into it, so that it can be used during the spring blessing ceremony. But without nobles, there's no mana. That'll mean less crops to harvest. What? I hadn't expected the chalice to be involved with such an enormous ritual. Its shining surprised me, but I had thought it was just a fancy ornament meant to show off the power of the gods or whatever. In reality, it was an essential tool for survival directly connected to how many crops our farmers could harvest. If less food was grown in this region, poor people in the city like me would be the ones to suffer the most. Before this political shift, there were too many noble children to deal with. Those with the devouring were just annoyances to nobles who want to keep the massive power of mana all to themselves. But now there's fewer nobles, and using magic tools properly is a lot more difficult. Kids with the devouring are extremely useful and important to the temple. What does the devouring have to do with mana? What are you... Did Frida not mention this to you when you woke up after nearly dying because of it? Hello? Didn't she mention that the heat was mana? Which shocked Benno so much his jaw dropped and he held his head in absolute disbelief. Don't tell me you haven't realized this yet. The devouring refers to the state where someone loses control of the mana inside of them. What? You regain control of your mana by moving the excess into a magic tool. That's the first time I'm hearing of this. Wow, I guess I'm like a witch or something. I guess I can beat my foes with bursts of mana and use all sorts of crazy magic, but who are my enemies? No, doesn't work like that. Not that kind of magic. My mind raced with the possibilities this new information had revealed, and Benno thumped my head, telling me to pay attention. This is how nobles are separated, roughly. Lay nobles tend to have low amounts of mana, while arch nobles have a lot of mana. Poor nobles without much money can't afford magic tools for all their children. It's common for them to entrust the future of their family to the kid with the most mana, and send the rest of them to their region's temple. In other words, the blue-robe priests in the temple were nobles abandoned by their families. They were necessary for the region to prosper, but at the same time, them being there was kinda sad. The temple has survived this long with weak nobles through sheer numbers, but now those numbers are going down. Each noble has to work a lot harder. It's possible they don't even have enough nobles right now. How many blue priests were there at the baptism ceremony? About 10? I could still remember busting my gut at the side of I'm making the Glico Man pose. They normally have over 20, but now they have 10. And since the ones getting called back are those with mana, you can imagine how weak the remaining ones must be. There's no mistaking that they would kill for a devouring kid overflowing with mana. But that's just now we're talking about. It won't be long before new nobles are born and this gap gets filled up. Don't think you have much time there. I wouldn't mind working for the temple and offering up my mana for a short period of time. I wonder if they would let me enter the book room in return for my mana. I fell into thought about it, and Benno, who had at some point gotten behind me, started grinding his fist against my head. Are you listening to me? Ow, ow! You have mana, money, and knowledge worth even more money. Wake up already. Realize just how much nobles are going to want you for themselves. His voice was so serious that I instinctively sat up straight. He sighed and took his fist off my head to wave his hand in exasperation. And that's why it's in your best interest to sign a magic contract now before you get wrapped up with nobles. Well, what kind of contract? A contract that the things you make will be sold by Lutz. But why? I had no idea what that had to do with the devouring and the church. Did he just want to exploit the situation to gain profit for himself? I tilted my head in confusion, and Benno sat back in his chair before beginning at his explanation. For now, it'll just be insurance. It won't be long before a thoughtless idiot like you falls for a noble's plot and gets dragged to the other side of the wall. This will let us contact you after that happens. Think about what situation you'll be in if you're forced to sign a contract with a noble. Commoners need permission to go to the other side of the inner wall. You know that. Right? I worked at the gate sometimes, so I knew one needed permission to go through the inner wall. I nodded and Benno grimaced a bit. The Guildmaster's granddaughter will still be able to meet her family after going to the other side of the wall. Makes sense because her family consists of merchants approved by nobles, but what about your family? I could only answer in silence. I had specifically chosen not to sign a contract with a noble because it meant not meeting my family. If I got dragged to the other side of the wall, I might never meet them again. I doubt your family will be able to go past the wall to see you, so at the very least, shouldn't you make a magic contract that lets you see Lutz now before all this happens? We'll be able to use that contract as an excuse for Lutz and me to come see you. Not even nobles can defy contract magic. I looked at Benno with wide eyes. I then looked at Lutz. We made eye contact and nodded at each other. With Lutz as an intermediary, you can send letters, messages, and so on to your family. You'll be able to stay up to date on how they are too. And most importantly, your family will be able to relax more knowing that they can make sure you're safe through Lutz. But I won't mind if you want to sign a contract with me instead. You won't be able to keep me updated on my family, Mr. Benno, so I didn't want to think that I would get wrapped up with nobles, but if that did happen, it'd be a good idea for me to preemptively give myself the ability to see Lutz. Frida had said that seeing her family was enough to give her strength, but did I really want to wrap Lutz into this too? What do you think, Lutz? I wouldn't mind checking out the noble quarters if I can, and passing messages is no big deal. I'd be more worried if I had to leave you alone over there. My head hurts just thinking about what you might do. Lutz himself was already on board with signing the contract, but we were talking about an anti-noble contract here. Considering how much of a dangerous burden it would place on Lutz, I couldn't be too enthusiastic about signing it. I don't think this contract is something we should take too lightly. Won't Lutz end up in a bad, sometimes dangerous spots? And doesn't this put your profits in danger, Mr. Benno? If Lutz gets pulled out of the equation, that's it for you and me doing business, isn't it? I pursed my lips, pouting, and Benno let out an exasperated sigh. You're not in a situation light enough to be worrying about others. Just be glad that Lutz benefits from this too. How does this benefit Lutz? You don't have to worry about that. Just think about what will benefit you. I'm gonna be honest. You already have a noble letter of invitation, and that means we barely have any time to prepare to do anything. Benno had more information and a broader perspective than me, so he was more on edge about this than I was. He listed out all the things we needed to do before the temple got a hold of me. First of all, we need to officially create the mine workshop and register you as its forewoman so you can retain an avenue for making and selling products. If money can improve your situation, you'll want to negotiate with the temple, so put you in circumstances where you can make money. That shouldn't be impossible since they want money too. It was true that wealth was a strong source of power. They treated me extremely well after merely suggesting a high donation amount. The more money I had, the better when it came to protecting myself. But if the temple took control of all the products I made, they would keep all the profits for themselves. I needed a reliable avenue to sell products. Benno had tricked and tested me in a few ways, but right now he was the most reliable person I knew. I nodded and Benno nodded back. Remember that the life of a commoner means nothing to nobles. Stay on guard. Prepare as many escape routes and avenues for survival as possible while you can. Get your hands on anything that can work as insurance and protect yourself. The temple had treated me well, letting me sit on the high priest's lap and read the Bible. But there was no harm in preparing insurance and escape routes just in case. Better safe than sorry. The fact I knew so little about this world that I didn't know exactly how to prepare was really frustrating. Benno looked at me carefully and continued. You said there's still 10 nobles in the temple, right? Find one of them that you can explain for your own benefit so they can as they exploit you. Wait, what? Find one of them that you can exploit. Can exploit for your own benefits as they exploit you, rather than just letting yourself be exploited one way. If you're going to be kidnapped and enslaved either way, you're going to at least want to open up your options for a slightly better future. Look carefully, pick carefully, think carefully. Don't just sit in a daze and go with the flow. Flail as hard as you can to survive. Mr. Benno, why are you going this far for me? It wasn't a simple matter to gather all this information and bring me such thorough warnings, not to mention helping me prepare a workshop. I didn't understand why he would want to do all that for me when I wasn't even going to be an apprentice at his store, because you're making him money. And he probably does have some kind of care for you, but still. The longer you survive, the more new products you can make. If I can keep my store connected to you, that'll mean profit for me. That'll be good for the both of us, right? That's all there is to it. Benno furrowed his brows and Mark laughed softly behind him. The master is merely worried about you. You're always putting yourself in danger and causing unexpected problems. It's truly poor for our health. Shut it, Mark, said Benno, turning around, but Mark continued on with a slight smile. Apprentices here tend to learn the fundamentals of trade at their own home, so the master has not met a child he needed to take so dearly care of himself before now. I will refrain from saying you are like a daughter to him, but you are like a daughter of a brother, and he worries about you as if you were a family member. Of course I do as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Mark. I let out an emotional thank you, and Benno spat out, why Mark? Mark and I looked at each other and laughed. Thank you too, Mr. Benno. I'll be really grateful to you both, and I'll do it. I'll sign the magic contract and register the workshop with the guild. Okay, let's see how far we've gotten. Dang, 23 minutes. Good lord. How far have I gotten? 62, 60, really? Contract magic and registering the workshop. Is that really what this chapter is going to be about? Here you are, sir. Mark set a sheet of contract paper used for magic contracts and a weirdly designed jar full of special ink on the table. I recognized them both. Benno put his pen into the ink jar and started writing out the contract. The ink was blue rather than black, just as I remembered. I watched carefully as he wrote the text of the contract. Let's hold the right to sell goods created by the Mine Workshop. In order to establish a representative, one must first gain the approval of Mine, Lutz, and Benno, then submit an application to the Merchants Guild. What's this line for? I pointed at the contract and Benno raised an eyebrow. Insurance. If a contract involves just kids, some people will try to get around it through violence or kidnapping. I'm getting myself and the guild involved to prevent that kind of thing as much as possible. When making contracts like these, it's best to involve third parties you can count on supporting you. Remember that? Thank you. He didn't just suggest making a magic contract despite all the work involved for him. He even actively involved himself so he could help me if necessary. So essentially he's telling you that if it was just you, had to go through you and Lutz to be allowed into this, they could try and use violence and kidnapping, but since he put himself and the Merchants Guild in this, they had to go through them too. I took a pen from Mark and signed my name. Lutz followed with his, and after Benno signed his own name, we prepared to stamp our blood on it. Lutz, please. I shut my eyes and held out my thumb so Lutz could cut it. Once he did, I pressed the welling blood against my signature. The blue ink sucked up the blood and turned black just like last time. Once everyone stamped their name, the ink shone brightly, burnt away holes in the paper, and ultimately the paper itself disappeared. Again, just like last time. Benno let out a slow sigh as he watched the paper burn away brightly. At the very least, this ensures that you can keep selling products and see Lutz even if you get dragged to the nobles' quarters. Learn how to protect yourself if you don't want that to happen, Mine. I clenched my fists to show my determination, and Benno, Lutz, and even Mark all grimaced with worry written on their faces. But remember, This contract would only work on people who know how valuable your products are. What? If a noble only cares about your mana, they won't care at all about your products. Lucky thing is, I'm pretty sure there aren't any nobles here rich enough to ignore how much money you can make them. Also, like I mentioned before, magic contracts only work in the town they're signed in. Be careful. Okay. Once that was done, we wrote up an identical contract on normal parchment. It wouldn't mean much to nobles, but it was important for reporting to the guild and proving that the contract existed in the event of something happening outside the city. Let's get this ball rolling today while the iron is hot. We're heading to the Merchants Guild right away. We'll register the mine workshop and establish you as its forewoman. That'll let you make and sell products without any problems. It'll also give you more power in negotiations by showing that you have options outside of the temple and are financially independent. The Merchants Guild was on the way home, so once we finished our business there, I would have time to relax. Benno hurried me up, and after watching Let's Go upstairs to his room here to change, I looked up at him. What can I do to make my negotiations with the temple go well? First of all, start by thinking about the best possible result for you. Figure out what you need to get from the other side to make that happen, think about what you can offer them, and think about what they want. As I listened to Benno talk, I thought about what I wanted from this. The first thing that came to mind was permission to enter the book room and read the books. Ideally, I would want to join the temple not as a gray-robed apprentice shrine maiden in order to avoid the arduous labor required of them. I could offer them mana and money. If Benno was correct, the other side wanted mana and money. Well, I guess these negotiations might work out then. That reminds me. The High Bishop told me that I couldn't belong to any other organization if I wanted to join the temple. He said he would try negotiating with the Guildmaster, but do you think registering myself as a forewoman will get in the way of that? I said, thinking about what the High Bishop had said. In return, Benno hit me with a sharp chop. Come on, mine. Don't count on others to do anything for you. Get involved yourself and secure your own position yourself. You don't know what kind of unreasonable terms they'll demand from you. You're right. To be honest, I never expected that the Chalice would be able to extend my life like this. I just wanted to read books, and since I was dying in 6 months, at best anyway, I didn't care about anything else. I'll accept that I was just counting on other people to do everything for me. But now that I'm probably going to survive, and I found a book room, I'm motivated to do whatever I can to get a better future for myself. I'll work hard. Use your head so that motivation doesn't get wasted on nothing. I'll do better. Les came racing down the stairs. He must have really pushed himself given how hard he was breathing. I looked up at the seven-floor staircase and felt awe in my heart for the heroic feat he had just accomplished. If I tried running up that staircase, I would definitely collapse before I even got to the top. Alright, let's go. Benno stuck his hand under my arms and lifted me up as if it were a matter of routine. Otto once told me that I walked far too slow for adults to bear, so lately I had just given in and accepted that it was my fate to be carried. Trying to resist would just tire me out more. If those joining the temple can't belong to guilds and the like, you'll end up as the only one in the temple capable of doing trade with the Merchants Guild. If the fact that you're already registered isn't enough to push past them, flash some money and force them to allow you to keep running your workshop. Benno continued his lecture even as we walked to the Merchants Guild, not wanting to waste even a second of time he could be using to formulate plans and teach me how to negotiate. I wanted to write down everything he said, and it was really frustrating that I couldn't. I stared at Benno and worked every neuron in my brain to try and memorize as much of his advice as possible. Like I mentioned, it's very possible that the lack of blue priests is resulting in unemployed orphans and a decrease in donations. List off a bunch of rubbish like you want to give them a feature in life, you want to give them work, or you want to improve their living situation, whatever it takes to get the permission to keep your workshop running and yours. Those in the temple should at least be smart enough to know that everything runs on money. Right. While you're at it, mention that you need someone to watch your health and work for you directly. Take a fact with a kernel of truth and exaggerate it as much as you have to in order to get people who will do physical labor for you. Let's works from my store now and we'll be busy for at least half of each week. I nodded repeatedly and processed his easy-to-understand, concrete advice. Exploit the moral high ground to secure rights for my workshop, exaggerate my weakness to get workers. It was true that I would need help to run the workshop at all, rights or not. Once they learn that even orphans will work hard in workshops, it's possible that other workshops might take orphans as well. Their attitude might change as they see orphans making the new products you think up. All this depends on your skill as a forewoman. Okay, I'll do my best. Benno wasn't just thinking about me, he was even thinking about the orphans. That really impressed me, but he just shook his head and sighed. Do you ever think for yourself? Don't just nod and try to do everything at once. Figure out your priorities ahead of time. But what do you mean? I blinked in surprise at Benno's sudden backlash, and he furrowed his brows. Apparently he had been testing me on something again. Prioritize yourself over the orphans until you've established your position inside the temple. Really consider the orphans as tools to exploit by appearing as a savior to them. I hate to put it like this, but more people will care about you getting hurt than anyone will about those orphans. Okay, I nodded just as we arrived at the Merchants Guild. Let's pull the door open to let us in, and Benno grimaced a bit. When you have stuff to sell, need some help, or are having problems, come talk to me. I'll charge you for what the help's worth, but I'll be generous. Thank you, this means a lot to me, Mr. Benno. It was late in the evening, and not many people were in the Merchants Guild. We passed by the first 2 floors with no time, and headed to the 3rd floor's counter. We returned our temporary guild cards, and gave them the documents Benno had prepared since long before our baptism to register us officially. The documents identified the Gilberta Company as our affiliated shop, with Lutz as the intermediary. Why, hello, Mine. You're finally here. Frida came walking down the stairs with her light pink twin tails bobbing and came running over after seeing me fishing through the bookshelf in the waiting area. I thought you would arrive to be registered right after the ceremony, but I haven't seen you since. I had begun to worry that you had collapsed during your baptism. Well, that's what happened. I actually did collapse. It took until now for me to get better, I explained, laughing a little at the fact that Frida had predicted exactly what happened. She glared at Lutz, who was looking at a spread-open map. To think that you would collapse with Lutz by your side. It's not Lutz's fault at all, really. It's all of me. I sighed, exploding at the Glickleman pose, and me going crazy over the bookworm were both entirely my fault. It was so much my fault that Lutz deserved a groveling apology from me, to be honest. Hey, Mine, get over here. Our new guild cards have been finished while I've been talking to Frida. She went back behind the counter to work, and I stayed behind to get all the details for my new card. I gasped in fear when they explained that the new card had carried over everything from the temporary card but needed a new blood seal. Give it up, Mine. I poked my finger with the given needle and pressed the welling blood against the card, making it shine, thus completed the registration. It was simple but painful. We paid the registration fee of 5 small silver, and the clerk began explaining the difference between a temporary guild card and a full-woman guild card. Frida overheard that and peered over at me. My, the mine workshop? Were you not becoming a merchant apprentice at the Gilberta Company? I gave up on that since I'm too weak to hold a stable job. In that case, may I suggest that you sell your products to the Othmar Company as well? Frida's eyes immediately shone with the sharp glint of a merchant seeking profit. I looked away. Sorry, we have it set up so Lutz sells what I make to Mr. Benno's store. Lutz again, Frida pursed her lips unhappily, but what was done was done. I had given her exclusive rights to pound cakes, and that would have to be enough for her. I already gave you the pound cake, didn't I? How is it? Do you think it'll sell well? Indeed, I'm having Lace experiment with new flavors. I would like to hear your opinion before we put them on the market. Please come and taste test them if you would. How about tomorrow? I mean, I do want to eat the cake. I do think sweet things are just perfect when life is being particularly hard, but I won't have the time to taste test sweets until I'm done negotiating with the temple. Thanks for the offer, but my plans are packed for tomorrow. What after the day after tomorrow, then? You could bring your sister if she'd like to come. That will mean Lutz doesn't have to come, correct? Frida was utilizing Thule to neutralize Lutz. He glared at her harshly, looking close to biting her. Much reminded me that she had blown Lutz off last time by having Thule ride the carriage. Frida, don't be mean. It'll taste better if everyone eats together. And if Lace is experimenting with flavors, there must be a lot of cake. That is true, but... Frida looked unsatisfied, so I started thinking of how I could turn her emotional invitation into a business one. I think that the taste test will do better at predicting future sales if more people are there to give varied opinions. Kids and adults want different flavors, not to mention girls and boys. So, more people, varied opinions. A tea party will hardly last with a large group of people. Frida's eyes had the sharp look of a merchant. However, seemed that now she was thinking about holding a tea party without even thinking about Lutz. I started piling on follow-ups to try and get her to agree with Lutz coming over. It doesn't have to be a big to get together or anything. You can cut pieces of different pound cakes into bite-sized pieces and formally ask people which they like the most. That way, Lutz can... That's a perfect idea. Before I could finish what I was saying, Frida clapped her hands together, eyes shining. Her expression made it clear she was already completely on board with my suggestion. She looked really happy and excited, but at the same time, it felt like she wasn't even looking at me anymore. I'll contact you when the date of the taste testing event is decided. Of course, your sister and Lutz can both come. I'll be ever so busy. Farewell, Mine. Let's have a good evening. Frida turned on a dime and raced back up the stairs, wanting to immediately implement the plans she had just thought up. I could imagine she was about to discuss the taste testing event with the guildmaster. I wasn't sure why she was that excited about it, but since she ultimately invited less of me, I had no complaints. I watched Frida go, excited to eat all sorts of cake after all the business with the temple settled down, but my happy thoughts were interrupted by Let's sighing. See? Frida and mine are just alike, aren't they? He said. I turned to see Benno cackling and nodding. By the time we finished the paperwork and left the Merchants Guild, even the long-lasting summer sun was on the verge of setting. The once busy plaza now had just a few scattered people walking about. Let's and I began our way home. As I watched our long shadows, I felt Let's' hand squeeze mine. What's wrong? I stopped and looked up at Let's. He was looking back down at me, his expression twisted with the complex storm of emotions from angry to tearful. He let out a mumble that fell to the shadowy ground. You're really joining the temple? Probably. If Benno was right about all that, I don't think the temple will let me get away from them. You heard what he said, didn't you? Yeah, most likely. Let's squeezed his lips together tightly, then looked at me anxiously. You think you'll be able to negotiate with them? The setting sun cast thick shadows on his face, making him look even more tearful and anxious. I could feel him squeezing my hand increasingly hard. I smiled, wanting to help calm him down as much as possible. I've never negotiated with nobles before, so I'm not sure, but if the Grail really is a magic tool that can keep my devouring in check, then joining the temple will be good for me, not to mention that I want to read the books in the book room. But I won't survive as a Grey Shrine Maiden. It all depends on how negotiations go. I'll work as hard as I can to put myself in the best situation as possible there. Yeah. Good luck. Let's briefly scrunched up his face as if in pain, then lowered his eyes and resumed walking. For a bit we walked next to each other in silence. Lux looked up, pretending to be curious about a passing carriage, but then swallowed down whatever he wanted to say. I was getting more and more curious as we kept walking in silence. Lutz, if you wanted to say something, don't hold back. I'll listen. Lutz stopped and opened his mouth, then closed it. After a moment of thought, he looked away from me. It's lame. I don't want to say it. As curious as I was, it would probably be wise to respect the male desire to act cool. I nodded and resumed walking. Our silence continued. The sounds of people rushing home just like us clattered on the stone roads, and the bustle of home life could be heard from surrounding windows. But the air between Lutz and I remained heavy and silent. The sun finished setting, and the shadows on the streets fused together, blanketing the city in thick darkness, which made it harder to see. You said we'd make paper and start selling real books together. Mine, you liar. Lutz's murmur was nearly lost among the clattering of passing carriage, but I heard it. His complaint that he wanted to say but never found the opportunity to say until now pierced my heart. Sorry, Lutz. I know I'm too weak to do anything about this. Benno's right, and I want to help you as much as I can to keep you safe there. Lutz gritted his teeth. But I hate this. You said we'd start a bookstore together. I did, but just remember, I want to make books so I can read them. I won't stop making books because I'm joining the temple. Really, I'm going to work harder now that I'm going to survive longer. My dream won't come true unless I spread books across the world, I said, which made Lutz look up. He shrugged with a forced, tearful smile. Your dream of being surrounded by books you spend every day reading? That's right. You want to be a merchant, right? You want to go all over the world as a merchant? I have my own dream, too. Let's both work hard to make our dreams come true, I said. This time Lutz really did come close to breaking into tears. Despite the darkness, I could clearly see the tears welling on his eyes. I want to help you, but I've come this far because I was with you. I want to work hard in Benno's store with you. I want to keep doing things with you, said Lutz before hugging me and burying his face in my shoulder. I could hear him desperately holding back quiet sobs. It'll be okay. We can still do things together after I join the temple. I'll definitely keep making books. No, that's not what I mean. I don't want to sell books you make with someone else. I want to sell books we make together. The dam had broken, and Lutz was letting all the frustration he had been keeping inside come flowing out. He shook his head as if defying reality, and I felt a twinge of pain in my chest. Tears came dripping out of my own eyes. I hugged Lutz back and embracing him in his frustration as I patted his back gently. Nothing will be different from what we planned. You'll make things I think up, right? When I have new ideas, I'll talk to you first. Before Benno, before anyone, I'll ask for your help. Even though I can't do anything? Lutz looked up shocked. I wiped away the tears on his cheek and smiled. If you can't do anything, what in the world can I do? Is there anything? And well, who else but you will stick around and help me make the weird things I come up with? I need you. I won't be able to do anything without you. Everyone already knows the stuff you make is worth money. They'll help you. Let's pursed his lips and hurriedly wiped away his tears, embarrassed that he had started crying. He then stood up straight, having calmed himself down by spitting out all his built-up frustration. The only thing I can see happening is other people trying to help me, failing, and ultimately calling you over to get through to me. Will you still help me when that happens? I shrugged and Les finally laughed. He squeezed my hand and walked forward, his bright smile contrasting with our increasingly dark surroundings. Don't sweat it. I'll make anything you think up no matter what. Okay, here we go. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty. And I need to go on and end this part off here. I'll see everybody in the next one.